good. It's got a weird countdown from 6 as well. It's a really strange number to count down from, but never mind.
Not 10 or 9
or even 5, but
yeah, that's true.
6 is weird.
It would be weird if they started at 2 because that's not enough time to really get set.
No, it's definitely not. But 6.
It'd be more like a wait, what?
Perhaps I'm missing something. Perhaps in the world of podcasting, 6 is actually the number. But I'm not in that club yet. Maybe, I don't know.
Me neither.
So, Bill, it'd be great to get started with a little bit of your personal journey into the world of veganism. What's kind of brought you here?
Sure. So I went vegan in 1992, which at time of, I guess it's not time of writing, time of talking is like 28 and some change years ago. I originally went vegetarian as, I guess you could say, a joke. My mom, who's very Catholic, had asked me to give up something for Lent. And for listeners that don't know what Lent is, it's 40 days before Easter, where allegedly Jesus Christ walked through the desert and kind of like tried to decide what his mission was. And allegedly the devil tempted him. So Catholics and some other denomination in Christianity, I guess, I'm not really sure, give up something for Lent. So say they will give up chocolate, or maybe they'll cut back on smoking or drinking or whatever. And I guess you could probably see where this is going. I thought to be kind of, to be maybe funny or just to kind of like get a rise out of my folks, I said I wasn't going to eat meat for that 40 days. And I know that nowadays now it's 2021, saying that you're going to go vegetarian or even vegan for 40 days would not really do much of anything. People would just say, oh, nice, good for you. Good on you. That's great. Or something and consider it a cleanse. Back in the early 90s, that was revolutionary. People thought if you don't eat meat at least once or twice a day, you may go straight to the hospital and die. Like meat was such a part of the food pyramid in everyone, including doctors' minds, because people, when they brought me to I went for a checkup, that when they found out that I wasn't eating meat, they were like, well, that's very unhealthy. That's sure to get you sick and that kind of stuff. So it freaked my folks out. As you could guess, 40 days into being vegetarian and not really even knowing much of the ins and outs of it, just not eating meat, I didn't get sick. I did not die, as you would guess. I in fact felt better. And so when 40 days were up and my folks were like, okay, great. You somehow made it. Somehow, by the grace of God, you did not die. You're going to go back to eating meat, right? And I was like, well, maybe not. It wasn't much of anything other than I feel great. I feel fine. I'm just going to see where this goes. And it was around that time that I got a hold of some literature from an animal rights group that was even around back then called PETA. And it wasn't from the internet, as you would think, because the internet didn't exist in the early 90s. It hadn't been yet invented or hadn't seen any widespread use. I couldn't Google what vegetarian or even vegan was. So when I went vegetarian, I didn't know what a vegan was because I had never heard the word before. I saw some literature at a punk rock show, being that I was a punk rock kid back then. And I saw what slaughterhouses were and how awful and horrible it was. And it started to resonate with me like, wow, I've accidentally been doing something really good. I can say, even if I'm not able to change the world in any other way, at least I'm not contributing to the awfulness by helping to kill animals and destroy the planet, because we knew then even how wasteful the slaughter and the meat industry was. And I was happy about that. And I was happy that I was at least then doing something good. And that choice to be vegetarian wasn't shaken until I saw yet another pamphlet from PETA at yet another punk rock show. And this time talking about the dairy industry and the link between the dairy industry and the slaughter industry. And as I started to read up on it and realized that the dairy industry was fed with cows from the slaughter industry, and I realized the link between the two, and that I couldn't just eat a cheese sandwich, because if I was going to have a cheese sandwich, I might as well make it a cheeseburger, because you're helping to kill the cow then too. And it was at that point, and I guess 6 months into being vegetarian, I then heard what a vegan was. And originally I thought that vegan was too extreme, but when I realized that the point of being vegan was that to be vegetarian and just to not eat the dead animal wasn't enough. I had to not eat the other things that came with it to actually make the real change. I decided to take the step to be vegan, and that was at that point August of 1992, and it's been 28 plus years. And as you can see, I haven't died. So.
And you're still going. Incredible.
Still going.
92, for many of our listeners, certainly for me, I went vegan 4 years ago. So 92, I can't imagine what I certainly hadn't heard the word vegan back then.
No.
And it certainly wasn't as mainstream as it is now. Or if it's not mainstream now, at least it's talked about and people know the word. It'd be good to understand a little bit of you've made this decision ethically, the punk rock shows, Peter, you're there, you get it. What were the choices like? What was the world like? How did you go about learning what to eat?
Well, it was pretty much in the beginning completely on my own. I knew one vegan going into it, and that was me when I became vegan. And it was some time before I met another vegan, and that might have been actually my brother. My little brother kind of followed me into it about a year after I did it. He kind of knew the reasons for it, and he was on board with the ideas. But I mean, it was kind of like you're going to watch somebody jump off something. And they're like, okay, they didn't die, and they seem to not been hurt too bad. All right, I'm going to try it. So a year in, he saw that I hadn't died and that I was still healthy. And I was, at that point, I think I was running track, or I was a wrestler or something like that. So it was like, okay, if it works for him, I can do it too, kind of thing. But there was no support network. There was no app for it. There was nothing on the internet. I think wasn't until years later where there were vegan support groups, I guess, on chat rooms and stuff. And I met other people through the punk and the hardcore scene that were also vegan as well. And that we could share back and forth. But in the beginning, it was primarily figuring stuff out. So, okay, the first thing that I learned early on is it's all about getting enough calories. So one of the things when you meet people who were like, they say vegan was unhealthy, it wasn't that there was anything inherently wrong with being vegan. It was that they didn't eat enough food. 9 times out of 10, it was that. Or they were like, oh, Oreo cookies and like, these chips are vegan and a banana and they're all plant-based or vegan, so I should be good. No, like you need to get enough healthy food and enough calories of it. And then from there, vitamins and minerals, you just sort that stuff out. But the biggest thing, biggest building blocks are calories. And if you don't get enough actual food in you, you're going to be, missing something. So I learned that very early, and I made up for most of the stuff that I just couldn't figure out with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and poorly made pasta. And I've probably eaten a metric ton of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches from the 90s. And I'm glad nowadays that people don't have to go through that. I'm sure that you didn't go through all that
no way.
4 years ago. And I think when talking about like my vegan journey, whether it's on a podcast or a veg fest or just to somebody, I think it's important to frame like this was then what I went through, but not what you or anyone else should go through. The only interesting part of it is I'm willing to go through some hardship and to go without creature comforts because of my beliefs, but not that anyone ever should go through that, and there wouldn't really necessarily be any plus side to it, other than if in the coronavirus or the next zombie apocalypse, no matter what happens, you'll be able to find enough food.
Well, that is a bonus, and I do note that is chapter of the book is the guide to surviving the zombie apocalypse, which I think is particularly useful. And I imagine when you wrote it, you probably didn't think that we might get as close as we feel like we we might be.
No. And when this started off, I remember joking that this was our kind of our warm up to the zombie apocalypse, because I knew people who were, either ex-military or vegans or whatever, that were preppers, people that were getting ready for the next whatever. And obviously no one expects there to be a zombie apocalypse, but like this pandemic, there's always going to be the chance of something happening and some chance of the government failing you, no matter what country or where you live, because at the end of the day, it's all about people. And sometimes situations get ahead of us, no matter where you are. So I thought it was funny that people were able to actually see what, doing without, having without, and realize how luxurious we have it in the first and second world. Most people have indoor plumbing, in America and UK. Almost no matter where you live, you're able to go get enough food. You don't have to hunt or gather or whatever. You go to a supermarket and you give someone money and get the food. And you have like entertainment system that comes into your house via a television set. I think we've just been used to having it too good. And not that we need to rough it more, but I think that this whole pandemic brought that to light.
It does. It certainly has. I mean, I haven't. I've been fortunate enough that I haven't really had to experience much hardship through it. But there is a certain sense of fragility. You sort of suddenly understand, or you suddenly get a sense that society is kind of quite fragile in a way, and it wouldn't take too much for things, the systems that we rely upon. The supermarket's open, that's where I go and get my food. It wouldn't take much for that to disappear, and suddenly. And our money at the moment, it's so, without sounding, I don't want to sound too much of a conspiracy theorist, but our money's so digitized, something goes wrong and you've got no money, so it was all quite a scary prospect when you start thinking about it.
You're not wrong. And I think we felt that through the whole world, especially when everything crashed. The economy crashed last year coming into this. If you had been saving for retirement or whatever, like I'm most scared for people who were just about to retire, and when watch all their hard-earned money crash. That must have been awful for people. I'm nowhere near retirement, so it didn't change my life at all. But really, the only main hardship I had to encounter was what gym I go to, because most gyms were closed. And that is truly, I feel truly blessed in that. I work in healthcare, so a pandemic is only a business boom for us. Yeah, which is awful to think, but it's the reality of it. Granted, I would rather, in no way, shape, or form, we have a pandemic. I wish we didn't have a pandemic. And it was not, obviously, as you would guess, not fun at the hospital, but it certainly didn't mean less hours. If anything, it meant they needed people around the clock, indefinitely.
What led you into that, the field of being a medic? Was that something you acquired through the military, or was it prior?
That's an interesting story. I would never have gotten into this hadn't it been for joining the military, and I would never have joined the military if it wasn't for 9/11. Which I guess that's a pretty good segue of talking about being vegan in the military and stuff like that. So thank you for that. I was living in Japan on 9/11, and I guess that's a fun Sergeant Vegan fact is I've lived about a decade outside the United States, and most of it in Japan. I'm fluent in Japanese. I love that country, and living in Japan is awesome. It's not that hard to be vegan there. For those who are interested in checking it out, I'm sure you could find websites that are just dedicated to it, and it's slowly catching on there. But even when it wasn't, just a little bit of resourcefulness, you can find food there. It's not that difficult. I was walking back from work on 9/11, and due to the time difference and stuff, it's pretty drastic. New York time versus Japan time. I got a text on my phone, some like characters that were like two big buildings and a fire and a plane. And I'm like, my Japanese kind of sucks, but what the heck is this? Like, this looks like a bunch of mess. And then somebody called me and they were like, you have to check out a TV. And I didn't have a TV, so I had to go to neighbors. But long story short, it was, two big buildings, a fire and a plane. And it was the Twin Towers in our country. And I guess you could say the world was under attack. And I've been living in a very cushy bubble, teaching English, and I had my whole world figured out. I was teaching English, and that was a super easy thing. And I was in a bunch of punk rock bands in Japan, and it was a fun and novel thing to do. But when 9/11 happened, and seeing those images and knowing that my country and the rest of the world was going to get dragged into this conflict that was inevitably going to happen, I knew I had to go do something. Now, what that was at the moment, I hadn't figured out. So in the beginning, I just did some benefit shows for the children whose parents were in the Twin Towers attack. And then when America started bombing Afghanistan, I did some benefit shows for the survivors, the children whose parents had died in those attacks. And I soon realized it just wasn't enough. I felt like I needed to do something more hands-on. So I left Japan and I joined the military. I felt as a vegan a little bit not called to be in the infantry. So I thought if I was a medic, that would be a good way to be able to kind of negotiate that moral gray area when you're joining an organization that the whole point is to go fight wars. How do you do that as a vegan who, especially me, I'm an ethical vegan. I'm not doing this, being vegan is healthy, but that's not the reason why I'm doing it. And that wasn't the reason I was doing it back then either. And that's kind of how I navigated that. And it was definitely an odd decision for my life to go in, because I had graduated, moved to Japan, lived there for an extended period of time. And at that point, it would have been a more, I guess you could say, normal life transition into build a family and just live in Japan the rest of my life, because I had I had a pretty strong foundation there and a pretty good support network. So to uproot myself and instead to enlist in the military as a medic, and then, specifically in a time of war, to go fight in a war is probably ridiculous looking back on it. But at the time, it definitely made sense. And after that whole experience, to answer your question, I actually originally got out of the military the first time because I was going to start a vegan restaurant. And that was right around 2008, which was the world doing back then? It was going through an economic crisis, so not a great time to start a business. And I instead, one thing led to another, and I volunteered in Haiti after their earthquake and got back into being a medic. And then I decided that what really made most sense in my life is to, dedicate it to helping people who needed it. And I thought, well, America's veterans have almost always had a raw deal, and maybe I'll help there, and that because that's an area where it needed the most help. And being a medic was pretty easy transition into being a registered nurse. If anything, it's easier because no one's actively trying to kill you, except maybe the patients occasionally. And and that's how that went.
Wow, there's so much to unpack in that, like incredible kind of history there. Starting out with that move from Japan into the military, how quick was the turnaround from joining the military to you're in Afghanistan? Was that quite a quick turnaround, or was it a while?
Shorter or longer than some. It depends on how you want to look at it, but actually, let me see. I would say much longer than it should have been. For most of the people that went through medic training with me were in Iraq months after they went to their unit. They went through training. So I joined the military in January of 2003, and there's always this, like, you go to somewhere and then you wait to do the thing you're going to do, but there's weeks that go by where they're like, we're waiting to start a class up, and you just basically, I wouldn't say you sit around, but it feels like that, but they're having you do basically busy work to keep you from going crazy.
Yeah.
Which feels like you're in training, but you're not. You're just that. So it was about 2 years until I actually deployed, because I deployed in March of 2005. But my first year was, I went from, once basic training started, it was pretty quick. It was basic training to medic training, and there was less of a week gap between those two, and then medic training back to Fort Benning, Georgia, where I went to basic training. I also went to airborne school there. And then within a week, I was in a Ranger depot, because I had seen the movie Black Hawk Down while I was in Japan. And I thought, I know this is an insane thought, but I thought, that's some shit I want to do, which I don't believe when you see that movie, that's the thought you're supposed to have.
No.
But unfortunately, I'm susceptible to the same shit that a lot of other guys in my generation are. After I watched Full Metal Jacket, I was a little kid when that came out. And when I saw that movie, it had exactly the opposite experience of what it was meant to do. I watched that movie and I thought, whoa, that's some shit that I want to do. Which then, obviously, I got older. I went to college. I did not go in that direction, at least originally. But it's funny how movies and things like that have the exact opposite effect as their intention. So anyway, I wound up into that whole doing that kind of thing, and that took. That sent me into a different pathway than I originally had gotten into, and that took an additional year with being with them, then to the 173rd Airborne. Long story short, I would think if I had just joined up and not tried to do some specialized stuff, it would have been 4 months into being in Iraq or in Afghanistan. Instead, since I picked up the specialty. I went into a specialty being airborne operations, and tried out for an elite unit. That kicked me into a completely different sphere than most of my peers, who a couple months in had already been sent to somewhere else.
Yeah, I'd imagine though, from with the background you'd had teaching English in Japan and so on, hanging out with punk bands, back in your earlier days in the early 90s and so on. Then to make this move and then be a medic and out in the field, I can't imagine how that must have, how you would have even been prepared for that, no matter how much training. I imagine you couldn't be, because was it kind of very much learning about it, learning about it on the job,
Oh, so much of it is on the job training. I learned how to do stitches on someone while I was doing it. Like, someone's standing over me telling me how to do it while I'm stitching someone's hand up.
Wow.
And that's the kind of thing you do. You're kind of at first like you're like, I hope I don't hurt this person. You're like, you probably your hand shaking because you're in the situation. I'm sure it'd be like tattooing someone for the first time. While you're and this is the very first time you've held a tattoo gun, so you're like, but like anything, you just get used to it, and you develop a confidence in it's second nature. I remember so I worked nights 2 shifts ago. The end of our shift, We had a rapid response. Someone was not breathing well, and they ended up getting sent to. Oh, can you still hear me?
I can still hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Someone ended up getting sent to ICU, but I was in the middle of that. I went over to help the other nurse and start the EKG, start the, get the patient's oxygen level up, put a blood pressure cuff on them, do all that stuff that, you're going to see in some kind of medical drama or something. And it was very second nature and very easy because I've been through it so many times before. And just like, doing the stitches, yeah, the first couple times it was kind of wonky. And then I did them on people's faces, did them on, wherever, or, any kind of thing. I doing IVs on patients, now it's like I've done thousands of that. So it's, in the beginning, almost anything is weird. You could even include the vegan thing in the beginning. There's the mind fuck where you're like, whoa, people have told me all my life, literally, that if I don't eat meat, I will instantly drop dead. What am I going to eat? And, in the beginning, it takes a while to get your feet under you with it. And that's only because change is difficult no matter what it is,
Yeah.
But once you get the hang of it, almost no matter what it is, then it can become second nature, whether it's, in my case for that job, doing medical things or shooting a rifle or jumping out of a plane or, things that you should not normally get used to, you can get used to.
I guess, yeah, it's amazing what the human spirit can do,
It's very adaptable and malleable, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. It can get used to almost anything, which is, I suppose a gift and a curse maybe.
Yeah.
So thinking about when you joined and you've been an ethical vegan by this point for some time, well versed.
About a decade at that point.
Yeah. So well versed in it. I'd navigated, no doubt, countless conversations with omnivorous folks and so on. What was the experience like, though, of broaching that subject, joining an organisation like the US Army? Love to find out.
So, as you could guess, people generally, just like the rest of society, would have thought vegans are, weak, wimps, crazy, hippies, whatever kind of nonsense. Now, lately, we've been dispelling a lot of that in mainstream, but, there's still people, and they're partly, it's fed into popular culture and commercials, and TV and movies take pot shots at us still about, if you don't eat meat, you're somehow not masculine, other kind of nonsense. But as you would guess, a lot of the people who would be the holdouts for change would be the kind of people who would probably be in the military, because that feeds most into that kind of nonsense. Luckily, as a medic, there's going to be a little less of that. You're going to have more people who are, compassionate or maybe a little bit more caring in that profession, in that field. And I was a line medic, meaning I was going to be with infantry or artillery in one of those units. They basically just kind of would have said, like, doc, and that's what a medic is called when you're with one of those units. They would call you doc. Doc's a goofy motherfucker, whatever, because they know that my job is just to keep them healthy and safe. And my job is, if some kind of shit goes down where their life is at risk, everybody looks out for one another, but I'm the one person that's my main job, is to go do some crazy stuff to get them back. And people were willing to overlook a lot of stuff, a lot of their misconceptions or, prejudices about what a vegan was, just based on knowing that, part of the hippie nonsense that they think vegan is caught up with would probably, if anything, fuel me to go farther to being able to save their own life. So, yeah, usually there was like the vegan and maybe some like scoffing at it, but I think the fact that I was in great shape, my PT, my physical training score was usually the highest in the company. Most of the companies that I was with, like usually hovered between 270 and like 299 out of 300. So if you could think of like one of the top guys, I could sometimes lap guys. If I'm lapping, meaning while they're still doing a lap, I've already completed a lap. That kind of thing, long distance runs, whatever. Even then I was like a little bit bigger than medium build, so I could hump a whole bunch of gear. Obviously with the medic bag, I'm usually carrying just as much as more than the average guy. So
Yeah.
a lot of those misconceptions or misgivings about what a vegan would be would kind of drop off. Now, I think if I was with infantry and I'm mostly trained to be, sawing people down with a machine gun, they might rightly think that Doc might not be the guy, to do that, to like, just mow people down. And I was never in any of those circumstances, but I'm just thinking that, Full Metal Jacket kind of mentality. Rightly, that wouldn't be the job for me. But people often find themselves into a career path that works for their personality, and the job will also, and what the job entails will kind of create a person for that job. So, I was a medic. It was very much part of my personality. I'm here to help you. I'm here to save you. That's like, and as a vegan too, that fed into that. I'm trying to make the world a better place. I'm trying to save lives. Oh, and I'm also here to save human lives too. So it kind of became one and the same. There was, I guess the only conflict was sometimes in some situations, it was difficult finding vegan food. So then I stuck out as the like, what am I going to eat here? Kind of thing. But weirdly or not weirdly, those didn't come up as often as someone might think. Mostly it was roughest in basic training. To get into that, what was it actually like trying to find vegan food in the military? It was roughest in basic training, only because you have the most structured environment with the least choices outside of this one place to eat. And there weren't many choices for the vegan. So for breakfast, I might have cornflakes, which I think you guys have over there, right?
Yeah.
They're not particularly delicious. And they are vegan. And you could eat bowls of them and you maybe, I guess, get enough nutrition. But there wasn't any soy milk or hemp milk or coconut milk or rice milk or, anything like that. So I would eat them dry. And then when I just physically couldn't do that for breakfast anymore, I started putting y'all probably have a fruit cocktail. It's that basically industrialized fruit in a syrup nonsense. And they would have that, and I would glop that onto it and eat that. And within months of being in training, I was just thinking of food as a way to sustain myself and not something I enjoyed. And I had made that peace. So eating that sloppy, crunchy, really untasty mess was, just part of life. I got through it. Lunch might be a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and might be salad on 2 pieces of like white bread, or maybe rice on the bread. None of that was good, but I got through it. I lost some weight, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been. And then medic training, much less strict, much more leeway with food. I was able to find plenty of food. And in my regular unit, other than when we were in training scenarios, I ate like there was no tomorrow. And I got stationed in Italy with the 173rd Airborne, and I was eating like a pizza a day, and I would get like 2 kilos of soy gelato per week. And I would eat the entire thing. I think people were amazed that I was not wasting away we were running between 5 and 10 miles a day, which is what's that, 10 kilometers to 15 kilometers, something like that a day. And all that, I could have probably, in hindsight, been the most ripped vegan on the planet. Instead, I chose to eat maybe 1,000 more calories that I was burning, and we were burning a lot just to maintain that kind of gap.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I'm intrigued as to the mental resilience required in basic training when you're sort of, I'm only imagining here the environment, but I imagine it's a fairly tough environment with, people who don't necessarily know each other that well by this point. They're figuring things out. There's probably pecking orders being established and, all these kind of things. And marking yourself out as different in the way that you did is quite a brave thing to do in that kind of environment, because I think most people would take the view that when you're in a group like that and an intimidating environment, fit in, whatever you can do, fit in. And I can imagine the scene of you eating dry cornflakes with this fruit syrup and all these guys in basic training thinking, who is this guy? Like, what was it like that?
It very much was. And for I wouldn't think there'd be much intersection between people who are thinking about going vegan and listening to your podcast and thinking about joining the military.
There probably isn't, but yeah.
But
you never know.
Those that might be like, for some weird reason, tuning in with, advice about joining any military. Yeah, fitting in is generally a better way to go, a better strategy. Having vegan tattooed on your neck and then joining the military is, I would say that's a less than optimal strategy for fitting in. And, as you would guess, I didn't fit in with that. I'm wearing clothes, but I have a vast amount of tattoos and a big vegan banner on my neck. So it was, when they saw that, especially during Ranger training, I remember we were out. A quick story about that. We went from airborne school to this Ranger training battalion, and I knew that in every school they would the first couple of days harass you and harangue you, and anything you would probably see on YouTube about videos for any kind of elite unit. They're trying to weed people out, weed the weak out. So I thought, okay, anything that I could give myself a leg up, I'm going to make sure that when I show up to this unit, I'm going to have no contraband. I'm going to have all of my clothes. Everything's going to be perfect. I was already in great shape. So if they try to, have us do hours of calisthenics or something, it's not going to affect me. I'm going to be in a good spot. Instead, I got kind of caught in a situation where I thought I was going to be leaving in a week. I thought I had a week to prepare. Instead, it just turns out I had to go that day as is. And so they had us all in this parade field area, this kind of like, imagine a basketball court with sandbags around it, and these drill instructors kind of, walking around screaming and pointing. And this isn't even basic training. I'd already been in the military at this point, 7 months. This is for a Ranger.
Yeah.
And they're screaming and yelling, and I'm in a great mental spot, other than I know I have, every form of contraband with me, because I thought that I had a week to be able to hide stuff, to be able to put it in my car, to be able to do all this. And instead, I had to bring it all out with me. So part of it is they were like, okay, take everything out of every bag. So I had change with me, in like loose change. I had like pictures of family members, the girlfriend. I had like a video camera. I probably had like, just everything you could think of that almost might be in a comedy movie. So at that point, they're having us do all these exhaustive calisthenic things, which in the military they called smoking somebody or smoking us. They're doing all that. And it's, at the time, it's because of me in particular that I had showed up like this. But really, they were going to be having us do stuff like that, drilling us, anyway, just to see who the weak links are. But I'm just doing push-ups, like whatever. Then they saw that I had vegan tattooed on my neck, and the drill instructors lost their shit because just the thought that
this was gold to them.
Who would have the audacity to not only be vegan but not keep it to their fucking selves, but to get it on their neck and then show up to try to be a ranger. They had a field day with that. But eventually I got all my stuff out of every package, whatever. Eventually, after throwing my stuff around and whatever, it was more than anything just an excuse for them to find out who the real weak links were, which it wasn't me. I was in good shape. I mean, I could do push-ups and sit-ups and whatever for hours because that's what I was in the military. I thought that was going to be part of being in the military, but there was, weirdly people who were not prepared to be there. And I remember there was a guy that was crying. I'm like, how could you have seen Black Hawk Down and any of the stuff that obviously all of us had, ingested as what that was going to be part of this particular unit, and be here on day one crying because someone's yelling at you? You like this, this guy like me had been in the military for months already, had already been through basic training. To be there, you already had to be through basic training, your main school, and then airborne school. And how they somehow didn't think it was going to be this, I don't know. So, I did get, especially in that situation, extra harassment for having the vegan. But there was always somebody that was going to stick out more than me. And at the end of the day, what they were going to remember is, this medic is a goofy motherfucker, but he's in good shape. So, I mean, what are you really going to say?
I guess, can you do the thing, physically and mentally is ultimately what you live and die by kind of thing.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, my job was being able to help people and be that guy that could go the extra mile to be able to save somebody. And you're going to always trust the guy who can at least do the job and show up better than the guy who, even if he's fits the mold, being a meat eater or whatever, if I'm able to run faster, fight harder and stronger than them, at the end of the day, you're going to want to especially if you have your life on the line, you're going to bet on the guy who could do the job better. Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose in a way it's sort of, it sounds a bit odd saying it, but almost a fairer version of society, in a way, because it is like we talk about things being a meritocracy, but it kind of almost like it is a meritocracy. Like there is a can you do it, can't you do it equation going on that probably doesn't go on in many other walks of life.
You do have a very good point there. Being military also puts you in a different mindset. And harkening back to Full Metal Jacket, the drill instructor has this line where he says, "Here you are all equally worthless." And I definitely ingested that thought that a bullet, a mortar round, whatever could equally kill me as it could kill any of these other guys. And it takes a little longer for them to train me than an infantry guy or a mortarman or something like that. But they're going to put me in a spot where if they put the doctor and the doctor died, that they were wasting maybe $1 million worth of training on that guy versus me, like 4 months, $50,000, whatever, no big deal. But definitely expendable. And it comes down to, can you perform? Can you not? It's the same as my job now too, as an RN. It doesn't matter, what you look like. It doesn't matter what your sexual preferences or whatever. It matters, can you perform? Can you not? And if you can't, you could be the nicest person, but get the fuck out of there because you're not able to help when you're needed to. And it definitely helps that you're nice and compassionate. But when it comes down to critically sick patients, you being able to do the job is what matters.
100%. When did the book come into this timeline? When did you decide I'm going to write a book?
So I had this crazy idea that I would write a survival guide for veganism. I think originally, it was going to be kind of cheeky, like the vegan guide for the apocalypse or something like that, which made it into the book as a chapter. But I think I first started thinking about it around the time when I was in nursing school, because I felt bad that I had gotten out of the military specifically to start a vegan restaurant. I went to vegan culinary school. There was a small program in Massachusetts, and I jumped through all these hoops just to accomplish that goal. And because of the economic crisis and whatever, hadn't done that. So I thought, okay, at least if I write a book, put all that information in it, and I'm able to share that with someone, then it will all bend for something. So that's what Vegan Strong came up. The field manual for a kick-ass plant-fueled life. I thought if I was able to rebrand vegan for people in a way that was less hippie and was able to also wrap up my military experience with the experience of being vegan, which are two things that have never really crossed paths in most people's lives. But at least in the States, when people hear that you're in the military, even if they hate vegans and they think we're all hippies or whatever, they have to like say like, okay, thanks for your service or whatever.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, if I could kind of be able to introduce veganism through that lens to them, well, maybe I'd be able to get through to more people. And if the whole point of trying to spread veganism is meet people halfway or meet people where they are instead of having them come to you, I thought this would be a kind of an interesting route to be able to get people in. So I started writing that in around 2014 after nursing school. My first job back with the government as an RN was in a state called Florida, which has at least a reputation in America for being a little crazy. But the particular spot that I was in was kind of boring. And I had more free time than a normal person should have, except from working, I was just kind of like, okay, what do? I can go to the gym, I can work out. And I started to write. And the advantage of being there and having all that extra time meant that I was really able to laser focus and create. Well, I'm happy at least with what I was able to come up with. And the second book came much later, actually last year, The Adventures of Sergeant Piggy. I realized there weren't many books for kids that had a protagonist that was in the military. So I thought maybe I would combine, once again, these two things that hadn't really crossed paths, the military angle with the vegan angle. I definitely toned down the vegan angle in this only because I wanted people to be able to buy it for other families and other family members and that. So it's like, it has a fun adventure flavor to it with a very almost not perceptible vegan agenda, though it's there. just because I wanted people to be able to read it to their kids, and maybe the vegan stuff to fly under the radar, so it could get more widespread reading.
In your sort of years of experience as a vegan activist, in the way that you go about your life and you tell people and so on, and just by living your life, you've got this activism going on.
Yeah.
From the punk scene, Japan, the military, there's so much experience. There's so many people that you would have come up against and had conversations with. What have you found to be the most effective way of communicating a vegan message to folks?
In my opinion, the most important thing that you could do is come across as a relatable, normal human. The more crazy you connect veganism to, the less someone is likely to think it's something that they're going to want to be a part of. And I've seen this at a lot of our demonstrations where people yell and scream, and we'll go to a restaurant and yell at people, and it just seems crazy. It just seems irrational. It seems like something that your average person wouldn't want to be a part of, only because how they're presenting it. But when you have most people, you meet them one-on-one and you talk to them like an adult, or if they're an adult, I guess. Or at least you talk to them like a rational human being, and you say like, hey, most people, if you say, do you believe in animal abuse, they're going to say no. Even if you eat animals, those people still don't think that they're abusing animals.
Mm.
And so if you frame what you're doing as something normal, rational, and frame the reasons for it as the life and death choices that they are, that, do you believe that in climate change? I am going to lose some people, unfortunately, in my country, because there's some people that just don't believe in climate change. But with those people, if you don't believe in climate change and they believe in conspiracy theories and other kind of wackadoodle shit, I might change how I frame that stuff, because if we don't even have the same jump off point to they believe in climate change, they understand the science that a lot of it does come from the way that our food is manufactured, and that most of the climate change, most of the methane is produced from cows, and most of the pollution that is created from animal agriculture, and they get that, and then the connection between and the reason why this exists is to feed us, and if we isn't feeding us, they're not going to be doing this, and they're not going to be destroying the planet. And then you could follow up too with the science. We acknowledge that most of our cardiac disease. So I work on telemetry floor with cardiac patients. Most of our heart disease comes from the diet, the standard American diet, and probably the same over there too, which is primarily animal based. And if you cut down on that, vegans have 33% less chance of getting cardiac disease than meat eaters or omnivores do. If you frame it in those ways, most rational people will see it and start to think, hey, that's not so crazy. But you have to have those conversations with someone who's ready to have it. If someone's not ready to accept that climate change is a thing because they're getting fed that it's from somewhere else, from alternate news sources, maybe trying to explain veganism to them, they might not be at the right spot for that. But either way, the less crazy that you make it look, and the less crazy you yourself appear to be, the more rational it is. And I think that's why having vegan role models who are either sports athletes like we have over here in the States, or they're entertainers and people that people, especially children, actually look up to that are doing it, is so important. Because more than anything, it's not so much a culture war, it's a war of ideas. And when movies and media and stuff portray vegans as crazy hippies or whatever, and then people then feed into that by looking like crazy hippies or whatever, or sounding nuts or yelling or just looking absurd. And while being artistic, and I agree that it's important to express yourself, it is important to remember how we phrase and how we frame that expression. And just to know that if you look like a crazy nut, then it's going to, even though you're telling the truth to somebody, people are going to remember the nuttiness more than they're going to remember the substance of what you're saying.
Was that messaging really important to you in the book? Because I think it comes across in the book that, I mean, it's a field guide. It's practical guide from somebody talking from a level that most people could relate to. Was that kind of key for you in the book? You wanted that to come across?
Yes. Well, originally when I wrote Vegan Strong, I started writing it in the Sergeant Vegan voice, the actual Sergeant Vegan voice, which you don't really get except for the military chapter, where I actually, if you notice, I've taken the profanity out of everywhere else in the book but the military chapter, because I wanted the military chapter to feel and be able to actually feel like it was for me to be in the military, and you could kind of get in my mind and go through those those difficult times and kind of feel it and see it as it was. But I realized that the Sergeant Vegan voice which was very obviously notable in that chapter, kind of got in my own way. I could come across as too blunt, belligerent, too almost like yelling, even though it's a book. You could almost see me yelling at you, where I'm like, wait a second, if somebody got a hold of my book and it has an open mind to actually read it and say, like, all right, let me see what this Sergeant Vegan guy's all about. If I come across as insulting, condescending, or just belligerent, then someone's not going to want to read that. And it was actually my mom, I guess a shout out to her, in that she was offended by me using so much bad language and profanity and I started to think like, wait, her church people are the people that need this message the most. And if I'm in the way that I feel like I should deliver it, if I'm getting in the way of that message, maybe I should just rethink that. So most of what you get in Vegan Strong is actually how I am as a registered nurse, where I'm like, I am very straightforward with people. I am like, okay, sir, this is what's going on with you. This is what we need to do. This is why I need, this IV. This is why I need you to leave your heart monitor on. This is, you had this question about your medicine. All right, hey, this is what you're taking. These are the plus sides. These are the downsides. Why are we here? Okay, it's because this is this and this. Occasionally, we'll talk about, you need to cut down on your meat consumption. But I work nights. I'm usually not with people at the time where they're eating anyway. And I mean, unfortunately, because it's veterans, I'm dealing with a lot of psych issues, and I'm also dealing with a lot of addiction issues. So I'm probably not going to be explaining the finer points of vegan philosophy while someone's going through DTs,
Yeah.
Just the truth of it. And with Vegan Strong, I ended up using my registered nurse voice, which is calm, cooperative, collected, and helping, more than my Sergeant Vegan voice, which, while I actually was a sergeant in the military, I might have been, a little bit pushy, as you would guess someone in the military was. It's my way or the highway, unfuck yourself, or I will, do whatever kind of threat I'm saying at the time. And it could have seemed, for the people that were in those situations with me, it might have been a little intimidating. And I didn't want my readers to get that, because it would just kind of get in the way of the message.
Yeah. It makes sense. And I think it's well used where you've used it. It takes you as a reader to that experience and gives you a little flavor of it. But then you come right out again when you need to, and the message, feels much more relatable again, and all the rest of it. But I think it serves a great purpose, where used in the way you have. So, more power to you for that.
Thank you.
Time's got away from us, but it'd be great to just let folks know whereabouts they can pick up a copy of both books, because I think they're both awesome.
I appreciate it. Both Vegan Strong and The Adventures of Sergeant Piggy are available on Amazon. So check that out. I'm easily findable on both Instagram and Facebook, as well as my website. If you just go to sergeantvegan.com, that's sgtvegan.com. You can easily find me, SGT_vegan on Instagram, and SGT space vegan on Facebook. You can see all the, I would like to say great, but that's kind of biased. Me saying it, but all the whatever nonsense that I'm into, usually in non-pandemic times, it would probably involve traveling around America and hopefully the world, talking at Veg Fest, talking on TV or radio about why people should be vegan, trying to frame this in the common sense, normal, good for you way that it is, and trying to not get in my own way of presenting that message.
Well, thanks, Bill. It's been fascinating chatting to you, finding out a little bit about your history and amazing experiences in the world of veganism. So, a huge thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Cheers.